Well, I guess it's time to get around to finishing something that's long overdue. Today I'm going to make some extra pieces to go with this. This is a pie splat wall decoration and mold that I made for one of my projects from last year. For anyone who is interested, the video for part 1 can be found here, as well as the link is in the description. I'm going to start by sketching out some ideas for what I want to make on this piece of melamine. This will give me a general idea of where I'm going with my sculpt. With my sketches figured out, it's time to start sculpting. For this project, I want to make some extra chunky bits to be splattered on the wall around the original pie splats. I did make a few when I made the original mold, but I'd like to make a few more that have a bit more character to them. This mold isn't going to be very big, as I'm only going to make a handful of extra pieces. Now that I've finished the sculpting, it's time to start building the mold box. I'm going to cut strips from this foam core board to use as the walls of the mold box. When assembling the mold box, I want to make sure that I have at least a half an inch of space between the sculpted items and the edge of the mold. Next, I'm going to use hot glue to assemble the temporary mold box. As I assemble the mold box, I make sure to seal every seam to the best of my ability. Silicone is very sneaky, and if I'm not careful, it can leak out of even the smallest pinhole. For this project, I'm going to use some silicone that was donated to me by a buddy of mine who is also a prop builder. He was moving, and he didn't want to take the silicone with him. Hopefully there will be enough to finish the small mold. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. I need to spray this mold with mold release. Even though silicone really only bonds to silicone, it can grip the texture of the foam core board and make things difficult later on. I added a bit of extra yellow pigment to make the color really pop. Most of my molds are pink, so I took the opportunity to enhance the yellow of this mold. I start by pouring a thin layer over everything and allowing it to stretch out, which pops most of the bubbles. This way the layer closest to the mold subject is relatively bubble-free. Unfortunately, I didn't look up this silicone before I used it. Turns out that it's a fast set silicone and it started to cure a bit in the bucket. Knowing my buddy, I should have suspected that he would have preferred silicone that didn't take a long time to set up. No worries though, since the yellow silicone is a tin type and I have other tin type silicones, I can just fill in the remainder of the mold with the Mold Max 30 that I usually use. I mean, what could go wrong, right? I added some black pigment to the new batch of silicone, because, well, I wanted to. I especially liked how the colors looked when I was mixing this batch. Now that all of the silicone has set, it's time to demold. Looks like everything turned out great. It just needs a quick bath to clean off the extra bits of clay. It's time to glove up and mix up some resin. I'll be using West Systems epoxy resin with a bit of white resin pigment for this casting. I'm not sponsored by any of the products or tools used in this video, it's just what I'm using. I fill up my pressure pot to around 50 psi and let it sit till the resin is cured. Now that the resin has cured, it's time to demold and see what I got. So, because the silicone cured very quickly, it didn't have any time to allow the bubbles to rise to the surface and pop. Instead, they stayed where they were, trapped inside the silicone. That's what all of these weird little bumps are. They're the bubbles in the silicone. The pressure from my pressure pot pushed the resin into the space where the bubble was, and they got cast as these bumps. No trouble though. A little bit of work for my Dremel and some sanding, and they'll be good to go. Lastly, I just need to flatten out the bottoms and they're all done. And here's the mold. And here's all the bits. I painted a few of them different colors to show that, even though I tinted the resin white, they can easily be painted any color that I wish them to be. It's a bit disappointing that this mold didn't turn out as nice as some of the other molds that I've made, but it's still completely usable. Speaking of, I did want to make a note that mixing the silicones probably wasn't my best idea. It turns out that the yellow silicone shrinks over time, and the black silicone doesn't. This has caused the mold to develop a curve. Though they did bond to one another, this probably wasn't the best course of action. In the next and final video in this little mini-series, I'll show how I make the pie splats out of the original molds, as well as how I assemble everything onto a wall panel. And I will make that video someday. I promise. Yep, I promise. Thanks for watching.